Yo, what is up guys? It is Samool here back with another Wyvern tier list for you guys. And today we're going to be ranking all the tanks or frontline units for Wyvern 13 specifically. Now, if you guys didn't check out my last Wyvern tier list that dropped yesterday, we actually ranked the DPS or damage dealer units for Wyvern. And I basically included all of the most common Wyvern units that are put in the DPS or debuffing slot or even defense break slot. And now today we're going to be dedicating this tier list to all the tanks and frontlines that most people use or I've seen used, because there's a lot of questions. A lot of people ask me if so-and-so unit can be used as a tank, if this unit's okay as a tank. So basically I compiled all of the most common tanks or frontlines in the game that people use for Wyvern. If you guys are using a different team in Wyvern 13, like a different tank specifically, that's fine if it works, but just keep in mind I am not going to include that in the tier list because they're either very, very obscure or not that common. So yeah, starting off, we're gonna start with Either. Now, you guys really love these tier lists, so I'm gonna try to release a lot of tier lists in the next few weeks. But yeah, starting with Either, guys. So Either is a 3-star Soul Weaver. It's a guy, okay? Don't get baited, guys. When I first started the game, I thought he was a girl as well, and then, you know, I got a really pleasant surprise. But anyways, he's not that good. He's very, very squishy. His healing's okay, but the thing is, there's just a lot better options. For that reason alone, he is going in the C tier. He's just too squishy, guys. Like, his base stats kind of suck, and he kind of needs a specialty change, in my opinion. He's such a main character in the story, if you guys follow the story, and he kind of needs a specialty change because I actually expect one in the future when the story unravels a bit, but for now, not a great unit anywhere. He's a very good adventure healer for, like, the first few, like, chapters of episode 1, but he slowly phases out once you get Angelica and other Soul Weavers. Next, we have Angelic Montmorency. So this is an easy S tier. Now, I don't really recommend her for new players because her gear requirements are a bit high, but she's so good in PvE all around and even usable in early game, mid game PvP that if you build her on high enough effect resist and tanky enough, you can use her basically everywhere. So you can just slot her in as your Wyvern tank and it should work. And the gear that you've been using on your Angelica, which is the unit I recommend to new players, you can free up and use on different tanks like Aros, Falconer Clury, and so forth. So yeah, you're basically able to free up gear space by using a Momo as your frontline tank for Wyvern 13. But until you get to that point where you're farming Wyvern 13 with Angelica and have good enough gear to swap over, I wouldn't really recommend her for newer players, but overall, she's a very, very solid pick. I actually used her for a long time before I got General Purrgis. And next we have Angelica. So Angelica is easy S tier as well. You guys have probably heard me say a million times every time someone asks me when they're a new player, hey guys, I'm an early game player, or hey Samool, I'm an early game player. What tank should I use between Angelica, Angelic Montmorency, whatever, Tywin, Krau? I always say Angelica to new players because she's the easiest to gear. Her base stats are crazy high for how tanky she is. And if you just put her on the free HP set, she can tank up to Wyvern like 12 pretty easily. And if you can't clear Wyvern 13 yet, you can just pit stop at Wyvern 11 or 12, farm better gear, put it on Angelica, and you're good to go for Wyvern 13. Next we have Basque. So Basque is not a unit that's accessible to most people unless you buy the side story, but he's actually not bad. He has like debuffs and he's actually decently tanky for a 3-star. So I'm going to put him in the B tier, but yeah, there's no point using him because if you're going to use Basque, you might as well use Crozet, who is a free-to-play unit from Connections. Crozet's just the better Basque for Wyvern 13. So yeah, if you have Basque and you're thinking about using him, don't use him. He's not terrible. Like relatively, he's like okay, average, a little bit below average. But Crozet's just better and fits the same role basically as like a knight that can debuff and is actually decently more tanky than Basque as well. So Crozet. So I don't really talk about him much on this channel, but he's actually pretty decent. The only reason why I don't recommend him to newer players is because he was primarily used in the past for Wyvern 13 3-man teams, where you would run 3 units and then like a dog or a fodder to walk as you're farming Wyvern, so you can gain EXP while you're farming Wyvern 13 for gear. But you don't need that anymore because you get EXP from penguins. Honestly, nowadays, since they changed the penguin system where you get penguins after adventure battles, EXP is never a problem. It's mostly about the amount of fodder you have that's a problem for 6-starring units. So Crozet's value dropped in my opinion, but before that, I would consider him like a top 3 pick for Wyvern 13 tank. But because of the changes, his 3-man, you don't really need to 3-man hunts anymore. And although he is a good standalone tank because he has a debuff, The thing is, you can't rely on the debuff too much, because if you do, you need to build them with effectiveness, you need to build them fast enough, tanky enough, effect resist, right? And it's harder to even build than a Momo sometimes. But if you do make him work, sure. But I don't really see the point in needing him as a tank to debuff, because Sigrid, Furious, right, are usually enough to cover that. Clarissa even is enough, SSB. There's just so many new Wyvern units that got released that are just super good in Wyvern, have a lot of debuffs. So for that reason, long explanation, he's going to be A tier. Some people might put him in S tier, and you know, you can't go wrong with putting him in S tier, but for me personally, I'm going to put him in A tier. Next, we have Dienne. So Dienne's actually pretty decent. She's a little bit... I forgot her base stats actually, but from what I see in PvP, she's pretty damn tanky. And she has a lot of turn cycling, and she has a very, very good attack buff. So it's really nice because on the first wave, similar to how General Purrgis works, if you have Dienne fast enough, you can attack buff your team and clear the first wave faster. And maybe it'll come up for the boss again, and because she cycles pretty fast, and then you can get more attack buff usage on the boss. So for that reason, it's hard to say if she's bottom of S tier or top of A tier, but I'm going to put her at the bottom of S tier. I don't think she's as good as a Momo or Angelica, especially for newer players. But if you build your team around the attack buff and you speed tune everything to work, say you run like Dienne with like SSB and Clarissa or something like that, and they one-shot the first wave almost and make you run a lot faster, then she's very, very good. Next, we have General Purrgis. So for normal teams, this is the best tank in the game. The only problem is his accessibility. He's an ML4 star, so a lot of players won't have him until, I don't know, like 6 months, even a year into the game. So he's really hard to get, but when you do get him, put him on your free HP set. You need 0 speed. You can drop all your DPS's speed from like 200 speed to like 140-ish, and you're fine, and put their stats all into crit damage, and your run will be so much faster. He also has that attack buff. He also CR pushes his entire team, so you don't need speed, like I said. You don't need to run speed boots anymore. You just go pure damage on your DPS units, and you just make your run super fast. And he is the closest thing to a one-shot team without one-shotting the boss, if that makes sense. So if you do pick him up early game, I would pretty much use him right away instead of Angelica. But if your gear rolls pretty badly, it's sometimes hard to use him. So you might have to put him on the bench for a while. But once you do get that gear to make him tanky enough to survive, get Proof of Valor, the 5-star artifact from your guild shop that gives you damage reduction, he becomes unkillable in Wyvern, and he basically will speed up your runs by a lot. Next, we have Elena. So some people use her or ask me about her. She's pretty bad, guys. She's only used in PvP. Now, she has a passive that heals and CR boosts herself and has invincibility, but Wyvern strips it and attacks 3 times. So what happens is she gets stripped and then takes 2 turns of damage from Wyvern anyway, so don't use her. Honestly, probably better than either, because he is pretty not good, if I'm being nice here, but Elena is pretty bad. If there's an F tier, these probably would go into the F tier, but I'm a nice guy, so I don't want to give anyone an F. We're going to give everyone a passing grade here, okay? Next, we have Krau. Krau's actually pretty decent. So, wow. Crozet and Krau are pretty much the same to me. I'm going to put him in a top of A tier, because he's super tanky, defense buff. He does decent damage with his S3, but he actually doesn't supply a debuff like Crozet, so I guess he's a little bit lower, actually. And there's no reason you should build him solely for Wyvern, because he's super good in PvP everywhere. So if you haven't built for PvP and he fits into your Wyvern team, then sure. But I don't see why you use him in PvE at all, because he's just so broken in PvP. But yes, he does work. He's just super tanky. He has a 5-star unit's base stats, and if you guys didn't know, if you are a higher base star grade, you just get better base stats for the most part. And he has that defense buff, which does get stripped, but you can run him on effect resist, I guess. But most people don't run him at 200% for PvP anyways. They stop at 100, so it's not going to really work. So yeah, standalone unit, very good, but wouldn't recommend him for Wyvern, although you can. Tamarind. So Tamarin's just so broken, you can use her everywhere. See, the only problem with Wyvern, though, is, why is Tamarind really good, guys, if you think about it? Okay, so she turn cycles really fast. She S3s, gives everyone that CR push, dual attack, and the attack buff. But what does Wyvern do? So Wyvern CR pushes you back, so you have to build Tamarind on 200% effect resist. And the problem with Tamarind is she's very squishy. So even if you use her in general purpose PvE while you're building her, you might notice her base stats are a lot lower than your other Soul Weavers, because her base HP is super low. So to be able to build her with 200% effect resist fast enough and tanky enough is pretty difficult for Wyvern 13, especially for mid-game players. Even like late-game players will struggle. And by building her on 200% effect resist, you're kind of, I mean, it works for general purpose PvE, But for general purpose PvE, you generally only want like 100% or 80% effect resist, I think, or 100%. Maybe it's 65%. I don't even remember. But it's definitely not 200% because you don't need it that high. Otherwise, Tamarind will die a lot, especially in expeditions, where if you don't build her tanky enough in expeditions, she's just going to get one-shot eventually. So for Wyvern, yes, she's good, but I would not recommend her. But because she's such a broken unit, I guess I'd put her at top of B tier. But yeah, don't rely on her. So Amelia, so this one's weird. So her S2 AI is really weird. She does have an attack buff, and her healing is pretty trash, honestly. So you're gonna have to rely on your team being fast enough, but she doesn't supply an AoE attack buff like G-Purge does. And she doesn't really, honestly, she's not that good in Wyvern, I'm gonna be honest. Just straight up. A lot of people tried testing her out in Wyvern 13 when she first came out. I even tried her, and the results were not that great. So I'm gonna put her probably at the bottom of B tier, and that's being generous. Wow, my voice just cracked, but ignore that. But she should probably be like the top of C tier, but I'll put her at the bottom of B tier because I'm nice. Next we have Rose. So Rose has attack buff. She's decently tanky, barrier, CR push, so she's not terrible. Honestly, she's probably better than Krau, but I think she's a little bit worse than Crozet. The only thing is she's like very slow, so you're gonna have to build her on 200% effect resist to basically get her turns off during the Wyvern phase, the boss phase. But for first wave, she works kind of like General Purrgis and Dienne, where she can attack buff your team, but she has, you know, less tankiness, and yeah, that's basically it. So that's why she's A tier, not S tier, and she's not really used that much anyways. And honestly, Rose is pretty good for like Fire Expedition and PvP, so if you have her built, you might want to use her there instead. Next we have Taranor Royal Guard. So this guy has like a reflect damage thing. A long time ago, people used to recommend him when there weren't a lot of Wyvern tanks in the game, but yeah, not that good. He's pretty tanky actually, but there's just so many free to play options. I'll put him, actually, is it a girl? It's probably a girl, right? There's gonna be a specialty change one day for this guy, and his mask is gonna come off, and it's gonna be a female, I swear. But yeah, Taranor Royal Guard, probably B tier. Honestly, it's hard to place him because I literally have never seen him used, except like maybe 1 or 2 people use him, like a long time ago as well. But I'll put him in smack dab in the middle in B tier, or she. I don't want to assume genders here, but yeah, B tier. Tywin. So everyone asked me about Tywin because they probably either picked him up from the selective summon, or they just pulled him and he's an Ice Knight and people want to use him because he looks cool, animation's cool. Honestly, he's not bad for Wyvern. He has a defense break. Honestly, you can use him as a AoE defense break on the first wave if he goes fast enough, and then your SSB or Clarissa can maybe one-shot it, but not that great. Honestly, he has no healing, so you're going to have to rely on speed, similar to General Purrgis, but he's a little bit more squishier than that, and he's also squishier than Crozet, so I'm going to put him probably in A tier below Krau. Next, we have Helen. So Helen actually has some like CR pushing mechanics, but she's a 3-star, really low base stats, and not that good. If you want to use her, just use like General Purrgis, or like basically anything else. Like any other knight's like better than her, honestly. For that reason, she's going to go into the C tier or B tier, probably B tier. I don't think she's as bad as either and Elena, but either, I don't know, but like somewhere around like here. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the, wait, one shot. Oh yeah, I included one shot here, but I didn't actually drag the icon, but Singelica would go here, Sinful Angelica. So if you guys want to use Sinful Angelica in your one-shot team, which you have to actually, then yeah, just imagine Singelica's here, and that pretty much sums up the tier list for Wyvern tanks, guys. And as always, if you guys like these tier lists and want to see more, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and also join the Discord if you guys want faster updates, and to join the community, because my Discord community is pretty friendly actually, believe it or not, and they actually will answer all your questions. Some people know more about the game than me actually because they play the game more. I don't really play the game as much as before, but I'm starting to get back into it, so yeah. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next video or tier list. Peace.